Welcome back, everyone. So far in our Postman journey, we looked at how to make requests, organize them in collections. We understood how to use the various HTTP methods, and we also understood how to use the body, different types of body, and we also understood the request and response headers. But what if the API you are trying to reach gives you a 401 unauthorized error? That's where API authentication comes in. Today we are going to look into how to secure your API request by implementing common authentication methods right here in Postman. In Postman you can see the authorization. We can use our basic auth, bearer tokens, which is the OAuth 2.0, and API keys. This is absolutely fundamental concept that you need to understand if you want to work with almost any real-world protected API. So why do APIs need authentication? The answer is simple. APIs need to be secured and they need some kind of access control. So APIs often deal with sensitive data. You send the sensitive data of the client's data in the body and you perform actions that should only be done by authorized users or applications. So authentication is a process of verifying your identity to the server. Postman makes it incredibly easy to do this, to manage these credentials. So let's jump into Postman and head over to the authorization tab of any, let's say this GET request. So you can see there is an authorization tab here, and the default is inherit auth from parent. But if I click this drop down, you can see the first thing is basic auth. The no authorization is the request does not use any authorization. But let's look at the basic auth. Basic auth is where you send the credentials, namely the username and password. So here you can see here the username and password field where you can type and provide the credentials. And this basic auth is not considered highly secure on its own for sensitive data over unencrypted HTTP, but it's still used by many internal and less sensitive APIs. So let's look at a working example. So in this GET method, I'm going to use a URL that I have taken from a demo site. So this is a demo basic auth API URL, and you can go to the authorization tab, and I'm going here and selecting the basic auth, and in the basic auth I'm going to enter the password username Postman and the password as password. So these are valid credentials. So when I hit send, we should get a successful 200 OK, and the response is authenticated is true. Suppose if you type an incorrect password, what should you get? You will get an unauthorized 401 unauthorized response. So this API will only send you the response only when you put in the right credentials. So that's the security I was talking about. So also let's look at the headers tab. So you can see here when you send the request, the Postman automatically adds an authorization header, and it says this header was automatically added. So yes, that's right, the header is added because it says because of the method used for the request. This is a tentative header, so you can find the value of the header in the console once the request is sent. So Postman automatically understands that this is a basic auth, and it adds this authorization information in the header. And if you click on the go to authorization, it takes you to this tab. So if the credentials are correct, you will get the authenticated true, and if you typed it wrong, you will get a 401 unauthorized. So this is a standard error when the username, password, the credentials are not correct. So another thing is, let's now move on and tackle another type of authorization called bearer token. So what is bearer token? It is often associated with OAuth 2.0. This is a much more common and modern approach for securing APIs. especially those exposed to the internet. So in this case, instead of sending a request with a username and password for every request, you first obtain a token, which is a short-lived token or temporary token that is valid only for a few minutes or maybe a few hours. Let's say you get a token and it is valid for 10 minutes. So you can use the token for the duration of 10 minutes starting from now, and after 10 minutes this token expires. So the same token, if you use it after 10 minutes of time, it is expired and the request won't be acknowledged, authenticated. The authentication becomes false there. And let's see a demo so we can better understand. So I have here another URL, another endpoint, bearer/bearer token. This is an endpoint for which that will work only when you select the bearer token as the authorization. And the token I am going to supply, and I already have a token which I am going to use here. This token can be any random number or any alphanumeric or any character, and the sensitive information is hidden automatically in by Postman. So you can see it by clicking this hide show icon, and yeah, so this token is a valid token. Finally, the authorization type we are going to look is the API keys, and here it is. And these API keys are unique keys, unique identifiers that are used to authenticate a project or application to an API, and rather than an individual user. They are typically long, unique strings, and these API keys are much simpler than the bearer token. This is OAuth, but these API keys offer less granular control or less security than the bearer tokens because they are just a single string. So API keys can be sent in a few ways. You can send the API keys as a query parameter, like I can show you in this URL where you can add a query parameter. So that is one way of sending the API key. For example, I have an API key which I can paste it here, and this is how you send the query parameter, the API key, the key name, and your key. This can be any random number. And if you go to the headers, if you go to the params, you see the same thing added here. So you can add your key directly here and it will convert into this question mark key value. This is the query parameter they call, and which appears in the URL. The another way to send this information is in the request body, but it is not that common because the body is more for the data. Okay, so let's take a look at an example get request, and here I have this API key as a use parameter, a query parameter. Let me post a valid one. So here you can see let me copy the URL, the full URL, because this one is for bearer token. So this is the complete URL, and this get request is going to be sent with this query parameter, and you can see the params API key, the same what is here is shown here as key value. So when I send this, let's see what happens. So you get a 200 OK because my API key is valid, so it's authenticated, authentication was successful, and we get a valid response. But if I send a invalid key here, you guessed it, we will get a 401 unauthorized. We still get it because this example works like that. This is a demo, but let's see what happens if I don't send anything. We still get it. But in real world, if you send an incorrect key, you will get an unauthorized response, which is 403. And also you can see here the response is showing the API key So let me send this key again, request again, and you can see the API request is appearing here. And basically this works. So this is another way of protecting your API, providing an additional layer of security. So not anybody can use this API. Only the user who has this correct key can access and use this API, or the application which sends the correct query parameter in the URL can get a successful response. So understanding these authentication types in Postman enables you to interact with almost any protected API out there. So this built-in authorization tab in Postman makes it easy to handle these complexities much simpler. So in our next video, we will shift gears from authentication and dive into working with query params, like we just saw, the query params and path variables in Postman. These are two fundamental ways to send data in your API request uh, via the URL itself. If this video helped you conquer API authentication in Postman, please hit that like button, subscribe for more in-depth Postman tutorials, and check out the full Postman tutorial series playlist here. So I will see you in the next video.